What's up, everybody? It's Nick Gaze with Springboard Creative, and welcome to episode 5 of SBC Digest. This episode, we got a lot to get into regarding the future of the NCAA, particularly Division I, and what may be happening with the Power 4 conferences, now referring to themselves as the Autonomous 4, the A4. So we're learning new things each day about this, and we're going to break it down, what it looks like, what's going on, and what the future might hold. So let's dive in. All right, so we are seeing numerous reports as well as getting some confirmation on our own that the Autonomous 4 conferences, formerly the Power 4, whatever you want to call them, are really looking more towards making some kind of split from the rest of the NCAA in order to kind of move forward with their own objectives, not really liking the regulations that are being handed down to them and that sort of thing. So, as I'm calling it, the fracture, it's coming. And we're going to take a look at what that looks like and why it might matter to the rest of the sports. As a side note, back in 2021, when the NCAA was redoing its constitution, they essentially ceded a lot of power to the power conferences, the Power 5 at the time. And you could kind of see some of the writing on the wall. In fact, I made a video at that time saying, hey, I think these guys are going to split off and create like a new Division I. We'll have 4 divisions, something like that. And I do think that that is where we are going. I'm not 100% sure what that's going to look like yet because there's a lot of moving parts, but we're going to kind of go through some of those now as we look at all of this. So I think it's, time to prepare for the fracture, if you will. First thing here is we look at what's going on, right? Division I, we've got 68 teams currently that make up this Autonomous 4 group. That's the 4 power conferences plus Notre Dame as an independent. The Pac-12 previously, when they were a full conference, you had the Power 5. You've got Washington State and Oregon State there that have had some affiliate membership last year. They are now bringing in 6 other teams to join them in the Pac. Most of those are going to be mid-majors like Boise State and some others from the Mountain West. But what happens is it still leaves them one short of a football member to have the 8-member conference that they have to have in order to be recognized by the NCAA. So right now, those 2 formerly power programs are kind of looking like they are on the outs as this moves forward. Similarly, UConn, which has been, a basketball powerhouse for the last 20 plus years, they did not have a conference for football this year. They're in the Big East for pretty much everything else, but they did not have a football conference because the Big East was no longer supporting football. So they are trying to find a home, and if they want to be a part of this power movement, they're going to have to figure something out. And who knows, maybe they end up joining the Pac 12, 8, 9, whatever they call themselves moving forward, which would be really awkward to have, Connecticut all the way out to Washington. But in the end, it's no more weird than having, Oregon in the Big Ten or Stanford and Cal in the ACC with Miami, Florida. So we'll have to see what those things look like moving forward because that could change the dynamics a little bit. But we're going to work off of this, the current 68 teams right now. So with this, we've got a couple things. One is that football is leading the charge. And if you're not aware of that, tune on in any football game, any sports news talk show, that kind of thing. They are the drivers of all of this. But interestingly, they're the ones that are probably least impacted as far as travel, things like that. And they're not even the ones that bring in the money. March Madness brings in $1 billion a year. That's what funds the majority of the NCAA, not football. So it is interesting that football is the driver because they are the revenue makers institutionally, but not as a collective NCAA. Another thing with this is that, when you look at these 68 teams, they're only making up about 20% of the Division I participants teams in general. But last calendar year, right, so we're talking about this fall plus winter and spring sports last year, they won 86% of the championships and had 86% of the national runners-up. So, they've got this small number that they represent, but they're just dominant. Right. And so, it creates this dynamic where they're already up here and they want to do more. So what does that look like? The other thing is, there is out of those 68, there's still limited participation in a lot of things. One of them is that over half of the sports, 19 out of the 37 sports that are available, the A4 participation is below 50% of that group. So, less than 34 teams or whatever. And in fact, there's some that are even below 25%. And when you look at this kind of as a bigger number, there are only 6 sports where all 68 teams, or all 68 schools, I should say, have a team. And that's football, men's basketball, women's basketball, both indoor and outdoor track and field, and cross country. So maybe not even what you would think about, if you're trying to set up, hey, all these A4 programs have to play these specific sports. They're not even all represented there. So there is going to be some unique things moving forward. When we look at these sports, like I was just mentioning, you've even got a chunk here, like I said, that is under 25% participation. And what we have is these Division I championship programs, right, where everybody is a traditional Division I school. And then these NC, the National Collegiate Championship men's and women's programs, are where they may combine Division I and II, like men's volleyball, or all 3 divisions. I think women's gymnastics covers all 3 divisions. So they're calling it D1, but they're pulling up these other schools to fill it. And then you have some co-ed sports that kind of covers everything: skiing, rifle, fencing, that have championships, but it's built out a little bit differently. But even there, again, really small participation. So why is all this happening? Well, essentially it's a power grab, right? We kind of know that if you look back traditionally at what's been going on in the NCAA for the last even 20 years, you have seen this. So, right now this group wants to have control. They want to be able to control the championships is one of the things they're trying to negotiate for right now. They want to control not only the format of them, but even the selection committees, right, that can boost them, and the revenue sharing as part of that, essentially saying, hey, we're the dominant folks here, we should make more money. So something like March Madness, where a mid-major Cinderella makes a run or something like that, and they get some money that can really fuel their athletic department for a number of years. It looks like the power conferences want to actually reduce their take of that. So that's a big issue. And in fact, if you look at college football right now, again, we said they're kind of the driver in this. Currently, the Big 10, 18, whatever you want to call them, and the SEC are actually trying to negotiate and seize some power over that, because what they want to do is expand the playoffs and then guarantee themselves more spots and a bigger portion of the pot. So even compared to the Big 12 and the ACC, the Big 10 and SEC say, hey, we want 4 spots, they can have 2 guaranteed. So it's really, starting to cause, some mass confusion and frustration. And honestly, it comes down to the fact that, when they built their conference out to 18, they're not getting as much money divvied up to all of the programs because they have to spread it so much more thinly, because of their realignment. So it's a little bit of reap what you sow, but now they're trying to re-rig the game to do that. They're kind of in this spot where, like, if they can't have control, they're going to take their ball and go home. I'm not sure how that's going to look, not only to them, but in the public eye too, and what the blowback would be there. So again, a number of issues with this. If they can't get control, and they can really only get control if the full Division I membership votes for them to have control, which is really unlikely, because I don't see, the Creightons and the Alabama Southerns or whatever of the world saying, yeah, give them more control because they've already got everything. So it's really going to cause some issues, and I think it's going to force them to have to make this decision. And if they separate fully as a full D1 group, it's going to cause a lot of problems. The biggest being it's going to absolutely destroy March Madness, right? Because you're talking about they have 68 teams. The rest of Division I men and women is almost 300. So, what are they going to do? Have the whole tournament to themselves? Is it going to be smaller? Trying to have them play up into it almost defeats the purpose, because now you're giving yourself rules as a power conference to, do whatever you want, essentially. And so then that's really going to change the playing field when there's already this giant disparity. The other question is, if they pull off, what happens to all these sports where they do have lower A4 participation, right? Do they cut them? Is men's ice hockey going to get cut at 6 schools or 10 schools or whatever it is because the rest of them don't have hockey? Or is it going to force those schools to start adding stuff? Even go look at a program like University of Colorado. They don't have a lot of the traditional programs. They don't have baseball. They don't have softball. So are they going to be forced to add stuff in order to stay in, or are some of these programs going to get cut? What's that going to look like? If they don't fully separate, now you've got this really weird dynamic where you've got this huge, disparity in resources, which you already have, but there was some regulation, right? You had a set number of scholarships that you could have. You had some guardrails in place. Well, with the transfer portal opening up and now the revenue sharing, everything's going to get different. And if these conferences now, maybe not basketball or football as much being affected, but a lot of the other sports, the head count sports, the equivalency sports where you can up your scholarships, that's going to make it really hard for the others to compete. If you take swimming and diving, for example, you get 9.9 at Division I, but if all of a sudden you can go to 30, that's going to make it really hard to be competitive and to entice people to come to your school. So, all of those things are really going to make this a challenge for everybody else. And then the question again is, what happens to all of the smaller sports? Like, you can't continue to put them on this national championship model where you're saying, hey, men's volleyball Division I and Division II play together. Okay, but Ohio State now has, 18 scholarships and the rest have 4. There's going to be no way to make this even remotely close to balanced, and you're already super imbalanced where you're seeing with some of those guardrails in place, you were still seeing how dominant the power programs were. It would just get that much further apart if they did that. So, it's going to be a real issue. Other issues that are going to come out of this is going to be, if they split, who pays for what? Because the NCAA will not pay for a whole nother, 10, 20 NCAA championships for this new division that wants to happen. There's also the issue of right now, Division I pushes down a percentage of their revenue to Division II and Division III to help fund those divisions. Would this new chunk be sharing money down? What does that look like? You have these TV contracts that have been signed already for March Madness or college football playoffs, or with individual conferences like the Big Ten and the SEC. And, those might be 8 or 10 years. So what happens there as we go forward? Can they get out of those? If they make this change, does it stay? I don't know. They have asked Congress to take action. That's not going to happen. They can't get anything done as it is and haven't been able to for years. That's not going to get addressed in any kind of timely fashion to intervene and make something happen there. And, then the concern that everybody has had that is not, a basketball or a football program is what happens to the Olympic sports? Will they be killed off, particularly at the highest levels? The issue there is those Olympic sports have the most resources at the highest level already. They have the best facilities, that kind of thing. So if you tried to kill those off in order to handle some of these other things, and you say, well, we're going to let mid-majors or whatever run these programs. Well, they don't have the elite facilities to train that kind of talent, and be on par with the other stuff. So it's going to create a world of confusion as you look at all of those things if it moves forward. So looking at all these things, knowing what we know, what we've heard, there's, maybe one viable option that kind of preserves the integrity of most of the NCAA sports and allows, this autonomous group to have some more control over the things they want. And that's going to be if football and men's and women's basketball basically split off and become semi-professional and remove themselves from the NCAA. If they do this, what that could probably look like is they're going to detach themselves from all of these regulations because they're no longer directly associated with the university where all these, federal guidelines or anything comes into play like Title IX. they're going to license the university's brand. So they might still be Alabama football, but they are not run by the University of Alabama. They'll lease the facilities. They'll pay rent to have games there. They'll, have to share ticket revenue, all that kind of stuff. But they will essentially become semi-pro. There is a model being built to fund this already because there is private equity already trying to invest in these college teams, to get 48% ownership as it is, where they are, currently standing. Once they become separate, you will see that kind of group come in there, as well as potentially seeing some funds push down from the pro leagues, seeing some money come down from the NFL to help fund this. And then you're going to have all the regular stuff, the TV revenue, the tickets, the merch, all that kind of stuff. Your NIL deals will be completely unregulated because it won't matter. Again, because you don't have to worry about Title IX or anything like that. It'll essentially just be the same as if you were, a pro athlete and you were signing an endorsement deal or something like that. And my guess would be there would still be some kind of limited academic component because they want to try to preserve this idea that they're not fully professional. So my guess is they would be students, but they would have to meet some super baseline academic criteria, and they would have to take, maybe part-time classes. They probably wouldn't even have to be full-time students. They might only have to take 9 hours or something like that in order to be eligible to do this and have the, kind of affiliation. But I think when that happens, then those athletes would essentially be required to pay for that. So they might only have to take 6 hours, but they have to pay the university to take those 6 hours in order for that team to, have the university's licensing blessings and that kind of stuff. So I kind of think that might be, part of that. And what that does then is it frees up all the rest of the sports to sort of revert back to what they were, but with some compromises from the things that are coming out of the House settlement and some of the other cases. So I think what you could see is, football and the 2 basketballs break off. Everybody else drops back down in. It actually helps a lot with Title IX balance because you don't have football in the equation throwing all the numbers off. So what I think you'll see then is you'll see the option to do revenue sharing. It won't be the buy-in like you've had. And it'll be a much smaller amount, not the 20%, it might be 5% or 10%, if that could be distributed optionally. And that might be like a recruiting thing is if you are Ohio State and you say, hey, we're going to share 10% of our revenue and Michigan is only going to share 8% of their revenue, right? That might be your recruiting edge there as far as that stuff goes. I think the roster limits that they're putting in place right now will apply, but they will be spread to all of Division I. And with that, they will make some adjustments to allow them to have practice squads. So you will still have the, the change that we were going to see for next year for the Power 4 programs, where they're going to have the reduced rosters but full scholarships. I think that's essentially going to be where everybody goes with that. And, if they were going to make this work, and that could kind of restore some balance to all this. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting in the courts for the next 5+ years trying to hash this out. And we still might be doing that. But, if there is a way to sort of save some of these Olympic sports or smaller sports, it is going to have to be with an option or a model like this, I think. It's not the ideal fit, but I think it's what's going to have to take place and what we've already seen and heard from some of these conference commissioners, some of the investors, all that kind of stuff. I think this is probably the direction that we are going to go. Whether or not it, shapes up directly like this, I don't know. But I don't think it can exist as those 68 schools just completely removing themselves because it's going to create way too many problems downhill. So I think you're going to have this partial separation and then some other stuff for the rest of the sports. So that's what's going on. We will keep you updated as we hear more stuff. I think, obviously in April, you've got the House settlement coming down, hopefully, and we will learn more, but I would venture to say this is going to be an ongoing conversation with new information every week, just like it has been. So stay tuned. If you have questions or comments, leave them below. Feel free to reach out directly, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. Have a great week.